It's amazing how much machines have changed our lives both personally and on the job in just a relatively few short number of years. Now, I can remember as a kid when my mom, who was a secretary in an insurance office, used to take me into work with her on a Saturday every so often just because she had to catch up on some of the customers' insurance policies, and she'd sit me down at another desk and let me play with a manual typewriter. Oh, that was fun. Well, eventually over the years I got to the point where I could accurately type more than 60 words a minute, and if spelling didn't matter all that much, sometimes I could hit 75, maybe even 80 words a minute. And then I can remember when I first sat down at that IBM Selectric. Now, oh, there was a machine, just beautiful, and I still love IBM Print. Then there came color TV, the Xerox, the touch-tone phone, the memory typewriter, the word processor, widespread use of security cameras, the computer, the cell phone, email, texting, Facebook, Twittering, Skype. Yah! I can't get away from anyone anymore, and everyone seems to be looking for me. And as much as I try to hide, they keep finding me. Well, information about me is all over the internet, and it may well be about you as well. And that's whether we like it or not. And yes, this does bring up issues of privacy and technology in the workforce. Now, I have to be the first to admit that I really don't know how I got by without so many of those high-tech gadgets that we now take for granted. Unfortunately, though, for every advantage, there seems to be some shady character who's trying to take advantage of the situation and collect information about me, or maybe even trying to spy on me for whatever reason. So as much as I love it, there can be just as much reason to hate this new high-tech world. So a couple of big issues have arisen because of our technological advancements that deserve more attention than we've ever given them before. And those are privacy and monitoring on the job. First, let's take up the right to privacy. And we have to break it down. First, privacy is just a right to be left alone and to be able to control information about yourself. And then we have privacy rights. And that's a concept that takes the whole issue to a higher legal and ethical level on a widespread protection of that personal information. We expect others to respect our privacy, but it goes both ways. And this is something called a reciprocal obligation. We have to respect each other's rights to privacy. And we have to remember that there are some differences of opinion. Now, it may surprise you, but in the United States, for instance, there is no constitutional mention of a right to privacy, and past court decisions have tended to be controversial. In the workplace, it all seems to mean that the employee does support the employer's right to protect trade secrets and other interests, while the employee agrees not to wrongfully intrude into the employee's private matters. Still, it does bring up some questions. Some say it's impossible to remain private on the job, so that really can't be considered a moral right. And how much information can you control about yourself anyway? Others are going to learn things about us, whether we like it or not. It can be through conversations, the office grapevine, or even email, to name a few. So the right to privacy in the workplace may be just too broad a concept. Now, the text also points to a concept called hypernorms. Now, these are considered those fundamental values that most of us can accept as basic, things such as freedom of speech, physical movement, and even informed consent. And individual privacy is at the base of all of these. Property rights can even enter into the concept. As people can own physical property, we can all own our own thoughts and our own personal information. So if there's this right, then there's also the obligation by others to respect that right we have. Now, advancement in technology makes some things a little more confusing nowadays. The law says, obviously, you can't wiretap someone without legal authority, but it's getting to be less clear if there's a right to read or text messages, and it matters whether a business is public or private. The Constitution only applies to government or government representatives. When we get into privacy invasion, it's through a case which has been called the intrusion into seclusion. A violation here has to be something that would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. And the issue that's growing is that with more technology we're starting to accept more intrusions into our own privacy. And then there are different laws regarding this in different states. A major consideration is deciding invasion of privacy, whether it's now becoming what an employee's legitimate and reasonable expectation of the privacy may be compared to how the employer would see it. Emails are largely exempt from the reasonable expectation, and more companies are letting workers know that emails are indeed being monitored. Now, generally, it's being considered nowadays to be a violation of employee privacy when something is not relevant to the employment contract, and when personal information that is not relevant is gathered, that it's kept or somehow used without the informed consent of the employee. And further, it's the employer who has to prove why collecting and using that information was so important in the first place.